Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the End Poem Podcast, a new one-on-one show where I sit down with the folks who make some of our favorite games, or maybe the games that are just around the corner. I'm Alex James Kane, author of the Boss Fight Books entry on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I've written a lot of reported features, news, and long-form stories for places like Polygon, who published my oral history of Morrowind in 2019. I've written for Killscreen, Rolling Stone, and Glixel, Variety, StarWars.com, USA Today, PC Gamer, Fangoria Magazine, and a bunch of other places. I've really missed talking to game developers over the last year especially, but I've been recapping Star Wars shows with my friend Marie Claire on her podcast, What the Force, since Disney Plus launched a few years back. So special thanks to Marie Claire and also to composer Christy Carew, who did the intro theme you heard a minute ago. I've grown to love podcasting, so I thought it might be a perfect way to catch up with some of the people I've talked to in years past, meet some very cool new ones, and learn more about the art and craft of making video games. Way back in June of 2017, in the lead up to Star Wars Battlefront 2, I wrote a profile of Tom Keegan that, through bittersweet happenstance, wound up being my first full byline for RollingStone.com, the very same week they laid off all their gaming editors who had built the short-lived Glixel vertical. But I have really fond memories of that interview with Tom. Battlefront 2 was his first Star Wars project after Rogue One, but before The Last Jedi, practically a lifetime ago. He's worked as a performance director on some incredible projects: The Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay, The Darkness, a number of Battlefields for DICE, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, 3 Wolfensteins for Machine Games, a couple of recent Need for Speed titles, Forspoken, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, StarCraft 2, World of Warcraft, Dead Rising, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Fallen Order, and now Jedi Survivor. Tom's a guy who comes from the world of New York theater. He once worked at a theater company owned by Gene Erdman, who, as it happens, was married to Joseph Campbell, the mythologist who synthesized the hero's journey and inspired George Lucas. When I started putting together this podcast, catching up with Tom about Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor was one of the first items on my list, so thanks for giving it a listen. Here's me and Tom. I think the last time we talked, you were kind of done with Star Wars, and then you were sort of heading over to DICE to work on Battlefront 5, I guess, would have been what it was at the time.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
yeah, you've done some cool stuff since then. The world's very different now.
Yes, it is.
I'm sure the process has evolved. And
yeah, the pandemic, I literally had just gotten back from DICE and the pandemic came and, everything kind of shut down briefly. So, I took it as an opportunity to work on other projects. I've been wanting to write a book for a long time on directing, and I finally got to start on that, and now I'm 3 years in. As you know, writing is challenging, hard work, and but I feel, very committed to it. I feel like as a senior person in the profession and somebody who's had some of the most amazing teachers on the planet, it's kind of almost like a duty for me to pass the information on, pass the techniques on.
Very cool. Yeah, you used to do writing in the theater days, right, in New York?
Yeah, but it's different. Writing a nonfiction book, is different from writing dialogue or structuring a show. Some elements are the same, but some elements are very, very different. But I have this great guy, Greg Miller, who's a writing coach, and he's working with me. He's like the main writing coach for the Las Vegas daily newspaper, which is actually a major newspaper in the US. And he's got a PhD in writing, and he's just helped me so much to structure sentences and paragraphs and get a tone and feeling. So yeah, it goes on a little bit every day. There's so many younger people coming up in the profession that really want to direct and have good ideas, but the video game industry still in some areas operates like a garage band. And I think writing is one. Sound, it can be, or voiceover directing certainly can be. Motion capture directing can be. And, there are a lot of talented animators and sound designers and people, but, they haven't taken acting classes. They haven't done improv. They haven't studied voice. They haven't studied movement. And so, or directing, right? It's a craft. And I'm very passionate about it because it took me a really long time to crack it. I was a movement person. I was an actor, and even in acting, it takes a long time, or it just took me a long time. I mean, I think some people are born, naturally gifted, and there are people in voiceover who are born incredibly gifted, who can do voices and imitate people and are brilliant.
Like Shelby that you worked on Youngblood with.
Yeah, Shelby's amazing. But Shelby has studied acting. Shelby also has studied acting and appeared in live action, but there's a lot of people who really haven't. And I think, and I know a few that have actually confessed to me that they feel a little bit insecure that they never really trained properly. So I also started doing more kind of private acting classes. And also during the pandemic, I taught a class called Foundations of Acting, where went through some of the basic Meisner and method acting exercises with mainly voice actors, and it was beautiful. It was a great experience.
So you've got this new sort of virtual world with everybody being kind of comfortable with Zoom now, so you can teach a class anywhere, anytime, right?
Yeah, you know what? I did a lot of it, and then I got so I think everybody in the industry knows that there was such a backlog that the moment things started to open up, there's been this flood of work to get to get projects out, like a dam that collapsed, and the pressure has been enormous. And that first phase for me is just kind of finishing up. Last year I did 5 projects, and it was a real challenge. And my classes kind of went on hold. My book went a little bit on hold, but I'm back into it. And the world keeps turning, and the world keeps changing, and now there's AI, right? And there's a lot of different concerns. The voice acting community is very concerned, rightfully so, about AI, because AI can take your voice and within 30 seconds have a voice print of you, and then there goes your work. That's a real challenge, and a lot of the voice acting industry right now is really trying to pull together as much as possible around this issue. Of course, we have the writer's strike in Hollywood going on right now, which AI is figuring in that as well. So things keep changing, things keep rolling, things keep going on.
Yeah, it seems like there's this fear that, you could get an actor who's pretty good, but is not what James Earl Jones or somebody who's really recognizable, and just filter the new performance through this like AI imprint. And it's kind of scary, the thought that you're sort of your recognizable brand, It's scary, the idea that somebody could just sort of take that and do what they want with it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just look, what's happening with music, like Drake, like people doing a whole Drake song and a music video that he had nothing to do with, him putting it out there and people listening to it and it going viral. I mean, it's a challenging horizon for creators. Again, that's what the writer's strike is all about. It's about creators being able to make a living in this virtual world and in this industry.
Yeah, sort of like protecting your rights, essentially.
Yeah, very much protecting your rights and protecting human creativity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, being kind of in the journalism world and from the whole writing background, it's very scary for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, on the sort of lighter note, Jedi Survivor just came out and people are really loving it. You're sort of online, so you're aware of how much people are sort of glowing about this game, right?
Yeah, well, as soon as I saw the buzz on it was very positive, so I had a feeling it would be successful. And you just never know, really. I worked on things that I absolutely love and thought were going to be incredible, and they bombed. It's heartbreaking, but you get kind of a thick skin and you roll on with it. And most of the time, I don't read reviews, but I kind of peeked at Jedi, and they were very, very positive. So that's very nice. That's really, really nice.
Yeah. People are digging the new characters, and then, there's a lot of that kind of notion that, games critics who aren't necessarily big Star Wars fans are saying, like, I don't really care about Star Wars, but this game is fantastic and you should play it. So that's kind of always exciting and vindicating to see. Like, it's not just the fact that I liked Star Wars when I was 7 years old. Like, it is a great game, even if you stripped all that away. But also, like, as a director, so you're doing these things, what, 2 months at a time in the volume? Like, would you say? Is it 2 months per project, or?
No, it's more than that. It depends on the size of the project, but we'll do like a 3-week shoot, let's say. And I will do maybe 4 of those over the course of 2 years. So, and that's actually a lot of time. And, over the course of 2 years, a game develops. You start out in one place and you hope it's still in that place when you get to the end. And so much of it is hidden from me as a director in terms of the gameplay because I'm not embedded with the team. And so, I mean, so much of it is about these story and the characters and, brilliant gameplay, game design, beloved characters all coming together. I'm really glad because that's a game in particular that really developed. The ending is very dramatic without any spoilers. The ending is extremely dramatic, and the beginning is very powerful also, right? We can say the beginning, right? Cal goes on this mission, behind enemy lines with a small crew, and that crew ends up basically getting wiped out. And then in the original kind of script, there was a kind of a long time of, various things you could do until this like big dramatic thing came up. And my take on it was that, I wanted to pull some stuff forward, but also that this loss had to really affect Cal. It really had to mean something to him. It couldn't just be like, we did this thing, I got away, Bode got away. Yeah, now what? It really had to be, he's suffering. He's suffering deeply. And, he's suffering from a kind of a drift in life. The crew has broken up. In a sense, one of the through lines is Cal wants to get the band back together. But there's a lot of complications to that now. And, finding that was a real joy, discovering these characters and what they've been up to in between and what did that mean, and talking to each actor, what did that mean for them? And always how does that parallel our own lives? As an actor, as a director, you're always looking for the connection. And, we were in a pandemic and there was this whole thing of like your life is completely interrupted. Now what? Then where do you go? Who are you? What do you have? What has any meaning? You have to dig deeper, for meaning. Also, for many people, there's this sense of at what point does your drive and ambition get tarnished, right? We start out with a vision, an idea when we're young, and sometimes we hit, but a lot of times we don't. And that dream gets a bit tarnished. There's a kind of surrender that happens in life. And Cal has a kind of choice. Am I going to pursue this dream or am I going to allow the dream to change and get a heart, right? Or find a home. So much about home. So those are really great and powerful story pieces to work with and story and character things to work with.
Yeah, he's sort of been off on this crusade for 5 years, right? Sort of hunting the people who hunted him. It's not quite revenge, but he's basically trying to clean up the mess caused by the first game. And yeah, all the people that he cares about are sort of off doing their own thing. Seer, has established like this society, or is part of a society, a network. Marin's off doing her thing, and then Grease is running a pub in a sort of Western town, which is cool.
Yeah, we had to do a lot of off-screen work about that, right? About when did this band fall apart and why, and what did it mean to them, to kind of to leave and go off on their own. I mean, Seer has had this kind of spiritual awakening and has a definite sense of purpose, but Seer always was someone seeking redemption. That was a driving force for her. That's like the spine of that character. She's seeking redemption. Cal is someone who's looking for an identity in a way, because has no roots, no idea of family per se, except now in the first one he had this kind of ragtag family, right? That came together. So he is always looking for a purpose. And in the game, that's one of the things he clicks into, right? There's this purpose and we're going to go after it, right? But it turns out he's not the only one going after it. Grease also, he lost an arm. It's not really talked about that much, but he lost an arm, and it was like, well, how did he lose this arm? And what did that mean? And from the first one, we know that Grease is a kind of a guy on the run. In a way, a creature on the run, a wheeler dealer, someone who owes people, in a sense, is kind of hiding out, right, in the desert somewhere, in a little saloon somewhere, hoping he isn't tracked down. And Bode is somebody, a new character who is looking, in a way, kind of joins up with the group, joins up with Cal, finds a kind of brother. Cal finds a friend, right? I mean, there's kind of a beautiful relationship there with that character, who also has really a lot of stuff going on under the surface. And that's a great credit to the writers, that, there's characters who have stuff going on under the surface. It's not all on the surface. And that whole Bode Cal thing was a really fun storyline to work with. But again, really takes a turn later on.
Well, yeah, it's cool that you have this whole first game as kind of a backdrop. And so there's just sort of a richness to the sequel by having all this sort of work in the background. Do you recall that conversation between Cal and, is it the ninth sister that he sort of fought in the first game, the larger, alien cyborg? So I love that conversation where he calls her by her previous Jedi name, her original name, and there's this notion that I'm gonna set you free, basically, by putting her out of her misery. Do you recall kind of the conversations about his thought there, and this idea that he doesn't really go out of his way he doesn't sort of think to that she can't be saved, right? She's fully on the dark side, which has some interesting implications for later in the game, as it sort of explores darkness and things like that.
Cal he doesn't want to kill, and he doesn't want to kill her, but Cal is still, even into this game, somewhat romanticizes the idea of a Jedi. And so when he meets Dagan Gera, right, in the tank in Survivor, his first approach is like, hey, I'm a Jedi, you're a Jedi, let's get together and and fight together and get the Jedi back or whatever. But it just does not go that way. Again, it comes up to that theme of, you have dreams and you have ideals, but then the world is not black and white, and people are not black and white. Just like with Bode, even with Seer, right? Like when you meet her in this one, she's not terribly warm. She's not terribly warm to Cal. So, it's interesting when you think about Star Wars and the whole idea of the dark side, and what in Jungian terms they call the shadow. So the shadow is the unexpressed side. The shadow is the side we don't want to show people, the face behind our face. And there's something really rich to explore there about, the dark side, also with Darth Vader. And, when you're directing something, when you're acting something, you can never play a villain as a bad guy or a bad, I mean that for a woman as well. Right? You have to play them as someone who makes choices that make sense to them based on what they've gone through. And, you have to dig down and find that place for the character, whereas like what made them make this choice and how does it make sense to them? How does it make sense to go to the dark side? How does it make, it's kind of like the ideological split between liberals and conservatives. If you're kind of like a liberal, if you're open and you're open to new things, then there are people that are going to take advantage of that. And if you're conservative, you're like, no, we're going to protect our boundaries by whatever means, right? We're going to protect what we have. But both sides have real weaknesses in that. In liberals, you can be taken over. And for conservatives, you get a sclerosis, you grow stale, you're going to shrivel up. And it becomes oppressive, right? And so I think that's the wonderful thing about Star Wars is it really explores that, the dark side, the light side.
Yeah, I think about the titles of these two games being Fallen Order and Survivor. There's this like image that both Cal and Marin, and really a lot of the characters, they're sort of dragging these dead families behind them, right?
Oh my God, aren't they?
These poor things. Like you can't look at Marin without thinking about, kind of the loss she suffered of like her whole people essentially. And then Cal, if you consider the Jedi sort of a people or at least an institution, it's basically the same story. And so when you talk about the Shadow, like that's immediately what I think of is just this notion that they did have families and then the Empire happened.
That's why they're so connected, Cal and Marin, because they're both orphans. They're both people who lost everything, lost every part of their family. And Marin was in a very, very abusive relationship, controlling, relationship with someone who kept her down, kept her prisoner. And so naturally it makes sense for her to to want to get out and see what she might want to do, to find her powers, explore. Who knows? Did she take other lovers? Did she, what did she go and explore and do? There's so much there, and so much she talks a lot about her background, but Cal, we really know very little about his childhood and his parents and where were they and who were they, and it's a mystery, and mysteries like that never go away. I'm an adoptive father, and I've met many adopted people. My daughter's adopted, and it's like you can be separated from your birth parents, but the mystery about it, if you don't know who they are, is never going to go away. You're always going to wonder, who were they? What did they do? Why didn't they hang around? What happened to them? What were they like? You have fantasies about what they were like, but you really want to know what they were like. And like Cal, you don't see any cousins or siblings or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Just his dead master's lightsaber is basically what he has as a past.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, it makes sense for him to be clinging in a way to this group of people that he kind of fought off and then got close to, but then, things break apart, right?
You're sort of the kind of director who you work with some of the same people over time on different projects, right? You sort of bring back people that you like to work with. Do you...
Deborah Wilson, for sure.
Yeah.
I think she's been in almost everything I've done.
Yeah, I definitely remember playing Wolfenstein, the new Colossus, and she was like, stole the show by the end of it, I think. She was really great in that. And then you brought back TJ Ramini as well, so that was cool.
It's interesting because I did another game, Forspoken, and Janina was in that, TJ was in that, Deborah's in that, Victoria, Claudia, I was sort of like stacking it with video game stars. And it was interesting because I found, what's his name? Anthony Scordo, who was the father in Battlefront 2, the Admiral. And I found this thing online where it was like, is there a sequel to Battlefront 2 going? Because someone had tracked all these actors who are doing motion capture in LA at the same time. And it was like, I'm sure they're getting them all together. They're doing a sequel. It's definitely happening. It's funny how you have to be so careful, about giving away anything. But yes, I like to bring great people back. I have this joke. I call them the Tom K Players. That's the name of my company is Tom K Productions, and so I started this joke of the Tom K Players, and then the actors actually kind of like it, like I'm one of the Tom K Players, you know. But I always tell them if you've been invited back a second time, you're in the Tom K Players.
You know, I don't know if anybody expected Fallen Order to be, you know, as successful as it was, right? It was like this huge single player game at a time. In 2019, people thought single player games might go away, which, you know, people were really scared of that. And then Fallen Order is like EA's most successful game that year, or one of them that's, you know, at least not a sports game. And, you know, and now, so you bring these people back like Cameron Monaghan and Tina, who plays Marin, and Deborah. Like, did you have a sense that they were thinking about the project differently now, or?
For sure. I noticed because was looking at a couple of scenes the other day, and then I was looking at a couple of scenes from the first game, and I noticed, I mean, I obviously was aware of it when we were filming, when we were shooting the second one, but that Cal's voice had changed, that Cameron's voice had shifted a bit, or the voice that he was using, it had really deepened and gotten a little bit huskier, and he was using that voice. And I think of anybody he thought about it the most, and also I think Tina thought about it quite a bit as well. She had a lot to say about how she thought the character, how she wanted the character to be, and one of the reasons I bring back the same people in my work. Now, I will say that the Respawn team, they kind of decided who we're bringing back, right? It already kind of was a given. They presented the project to me and they said, oh, we're bringing back this person, this person, this person. Tina really wanted the character to have more agency, and also just to be a little less stiff, a little less kind of Spock-like. This time around. So it's kind of finding that fine line between, you know, Marion is, you know, in the first one, she was like, why would you, you know, why are you upset? Or why do you, you know, she would just say the facts. And in this one, she would say the facts. She would cut through the facts when she needed to, but she had more nuance. And, you know, she had digested her own history and her own past and the idea of emotions a little bit more. So those kind of campfire scenes, you know, there was some real intimacy, you know, between them in this one. So in fact, there was a lot about intimacy and friendships. There's this scene kind of near the end where they're having tea. Grease brings some tea out and they're sitting around a campfire, and there's a sense of hope, and always around a sense of hope there's also, you know, and they're gonna go off to Tanalorr, and there's always a sense of loss as well, sort of like hope and loss together. But we had all these nice little scenes where people, they're not shouting, they're just like, you know, they're out in this beautiful location, and, you know, sometimes it's like right before the vacation or right before the trip is the sweetest time. You know, the anticipation of something is just so delicious because the reality of whatever difficulties you're going to face, you don't have to deal with. So it was a wonderful scene to do because it just kind of went from, it was sort of small huddle to small huddle to small huddle, you know, with these very intimate conversations. I love that scene. I just watched it the other day. I was reading about someone that had said it was one of their favorite scenes, and I was like, oh yeah. You know, here's the thing about I do this work, and then, like, you know, a year or so later it comes out, and I'm working on other things, and it's like, okay, I want to go back and see, how did that scene turn out? Sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's like, oh, really? Because, you know, video games are made by so many people. Sometimes they don't get the memo down the chain of what we were working on in the shoot. So.
Well, you know, if I'm going to pay compliments to your work, one of the things that game critics talk about is how bad romance or intimacy or kissing scenes or sex scenes, things like that, tend to be in video games across the board. It's very, very hard to get right. And I think that when I think back to like things like Wolfenstein or the sort of campfire, you know, quiet conversations in Survivor, like, you're very good at that. You know, that the very subtle human, you know, intimate acting of just two people having a very whispered conversation or what have you. That's something that games definitely struggle with because of, like you say, that pipeline of 10,000 people touching the same project, right? So.
Yeah. one of the things I saw the scene, the scene with Marin again, and when they kiss, I guess I can say that. It's Marin who initiates it, right? And right there. So I'm always I always feel like when I see sex scenes between men and women, particularly, it's like, why is it always the guy that, why is the woman always the receiver and the guy is always the giver? Like, can't we shake this up a little bit? But also in Wolfenstein, then we had sex scenes. We had two sex scenes in the New Order, and I think that was the first time I ever did a sex scene. I think I've done very few actually. I think those are probably the only actual sex scenes I've ever done. But we're doing sex scenes in mocap suits with a lot of Velcro, so there's a lot of rustling. And actually, the new Colossus had some sex scenes too. That's right, between Frau Engel's daughter and the African guy, and it's wonderful when performers want to get into it and they sort of go, they feel safe enough. Let's just say that they feel safe enough. But I think it has to be, about emotion more. And underneath the emotion, those emotional moments is I'm very big on action. Like, what's the action? I don't know if you're aware of what an action means in acting. The action is the thing that the character, the ideal thing they want to accomplish, or the way they want to affect the person in the scene. And so if let's say your action is to get her to trust me, right? You can start out on a course of behavior, but you still have to play off the partner to see. Sometimes I'll ask the other person, I'm like, are you trusting him, or are you getting excited? Do you feel like do you feel like she's bringing you on board? And they'll go like, not really. And I'm like, to the actor, I'm like, come up with something else, try something else, because you're not having the effect. Don't get stuck in doing it a certain way. You have to be in the moment, and you have to see the effect on that person's face. And I want to say to the other person in the scene, I was like, try something unconventional. Are you getting that? Are you feeling, are you feeling like you want to go to town? Does it sound like a good proposition? There's a whole scene where they're trying to convince Grease to sort of explore going to Tenelor, and Grease is like, oh, nobody wants me, and they can't just go, come on, Grease, you're coming with us, like that. That wouldn't affect Grease, so they have to kind of back in. Well, we could find somebody else. Well, I guess, blah blah blah, right? Like I like you can affect somebody, you can make somebody feel great or like a piece of shit without having to illustrate it. I can say, Alex, your questions are so brilliant, and you're always so well prepared. I don't have to go, your questions are so brilliant, right? I can just say it. I could also say, do you know anything about acting? Clearly you don't, right?
Yeah, I was in one play, so not much, not much.
It's like I don't have to I don't have to jump up and down and have the effect. I can just watch, and that's how I like to work, especially in those intimate moments, about people connecting and just seeing how their words or their presence affects the other person.
Yeah, you used the phrase before a few years ago, working the scene. So that's what you're talking about, right? Like,
yeah.
Just kind of trying different ways of getting it to do what's trying to be accomplished on the script, right? Like that kind of thing.
You're seeing people in a situation, and as the player, the audience, whatever, you go like, let's say in a rom-com, right? You go like, they meet cute or they don't meet well, right? Or whatever, and you go, they're going to get married. Right. They're going to get together. I know it. And then the whole time you're wondering, how are they going to get together? They're just getting worse with each other, But you're seeing the people in the situation, but they don't have to illustrate that for you. And if it's good writing, you get that too. So, you're working the scene. I always tell actors when they're auditioning for me, I'm like, I just want to see a person in a situation. You look at somebody and go, oh boy, oh, well, they're in trouble now. Or, the audience is always one step ahead as well. They're always one step ahead. Somebody mentions something, they go, oh, or he's going to betray them, or blah, 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 blah. Right. And then one little slip. And so, there's a lot of times where I really like to bury the action, the person, there's that one particular character, right, where they have a lot buried throughout the whole game. They have a lot buried, and I'm like, you cannot You cannot allude to anything at all. You cannot. I have to feel you really care about Cal. I have to feel you're giving him the best advice. And really, sincerely, even if you know that something terrible is going to happen, because that's your long game. Somebody asked me the other day, they were like, do you ever like just give people the pages that they're going to do and then, not tell them what's going to happen? Like some directors like to do that. And I'm like, I would never do that. Because sometimes if, for example, like that character that is so much hidden, like if they don't know what's going to happen in the end, then how do they know how to set that up, from the beginning, or how to hide that? And then they're going to feel really cheated and manipulated. Sometimes they haven't written the thing, or sometimes we haven't discovered something about a character. And then we all kind of go, God, I wish we had discovered this earlier because we would have played this scene a little bit differently early on. But when I'm doing my homework, my director's homework, I do a lot of homework. I like to do homework. I feel really insecure. I think I'm a nervous person. I don't really come off that way, but I'm really nervous. And even like before our meeting today, I did homework. So I do a lot of homework, but it's funny because when I'm doing directing homework and when I'm doing scenes and things, it's like I make some choices, and then the further into the act I get, like, oh no, okay, now I decide this, and I'm like, nope, got to go back to the beginning and change that choice at the beginning because now, and finally, when I find the scene, it's like, okay, then I got to go back to the beginning and make it line up. Even if you don't see it coming, it's logically going to be earned by this specific point. But every scene has to be about something. Every scene has to be a turning point, has to have a turning point, or has to have something that changes, and has to have people that are, if they're not butting heads, that's what they call conflict, right? If they're not butting heads, they have to be like in a three-legged race. You know what that is, right? Where they, you know, you have a potato sack, or you tie one leg together, and you're trying to you have to walk together, but you have different rhythms, and so you have to sculpt the scene around that. Where's the thing that changes, and how are the people with different rhythms moving towards that? People who have different desires, and one of them is going to get what they desire, and the other person may not, or may get partially, or that's where dramatic tension comes in.
Yeah, I love that whole Jedi section of the game where Cal and Marin are just sort of on their adventure together, and that's a good example, I think, because she's sort of so much more powerful than him in sort of a raw sense, how she can just sort of teleport from place to place, and he's got to like do the mountain climbing thing a little bit more the old fashioned way, so that's always fun.
Yeah, or ride a spammel, or um, you know, is she gonna wait for him? Is she gonna go on ahead? Right? Yeah, yeah. That's a perfect example of that. That's a built-in conflict right there.
It's funny, you mentioned you compared her to Spock a minute ago, and when I played this game, it reminded me so much of The Wrath of Khan because of Dagon Gera. Did that movie come up at all?
No, no, it didn't. But that's a good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, yeah,
It's got a few parallels because of like the space station with the laboratory and like the whole idea of like the world shaping technology and stuff. So I don't know. I went and watched the movie after I finished the game, and it was kind of a fun little. But yeah, Dagon Gera was a fun character for sure, and it's funny you pointed out that Grease is like missing one of his right arms because Dagon is also missing his right arm.
yeah. A missing arm is works well on the video game. In Wolfenstein, the new Colossus, right? Then Gideon Emery's character loses his arm, and there's the whole thing about, right, he has the mechanical arm, and he's crushing the cookies, and he tries to give a road. The arm has a mind of its own, and he's at battle. He's in battle with the arm. Uh,
Is he the scientist with the monkey or?
no, no, he's the God, I can't believe. I want to say he's the Scottish guy. He's one of the two players in. You can play as him, or you can play as the younger guy.
That's right. Yeah, he's the guy I think you rescued him from prison in the first game, something like that.
Yes, Fergus. Fergus. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Gideon. He plays BD1 right in the mocap.
So it's funny because we were working on the first game, And we had an actor who was kind of handling BD1. And there's a lot to work out at the beginning, with the whole Jedi thing and kind of training people to walk like a Jedi. And we realized that we had to, because Cal had so many scenes with BD1 that it had to be like dialogue, because then there's nothing coming back. And I called up Gideon. I said to the producers, I was like, I think Gideon Emery could do this really well because he does all these sounds and stuff. And I called up Gideon and I was like, Gideon, I would love to, and he lives in New York also. So I was like, I've got this role. It's not on camera. It's it's handling this thing, this kind of puppet droid, and we need sounds and we need dialogue. And I'm like, you'll be on set, you'll be in every scene, but you won't be in the game. Are you open to that? And he was like, sure. Oh, sure. Okay, sure. Yeah, let me think about it. Okay, sure, why not? And he got this nose flute. Do you know what a nose flute is? It's like this weird thing that you have like a band and it's like this flat thing, you put it on your nose and he makes these BD1 sounds like he's wearing this thing around his face. It's really wild and he's like always there. He's there in every scene. He's like a big part of the cast. And well, BD would do this, BD would do that. So he's really an amazing part of it. And I think they took some of the sounds from sounds that he did and places that he did them and things he added and, dialogue that he had with Cal.
Yeah, he's sort of Cal's Chewbacca or R2D2. He's a fan favorite character as well as like he's got that sort of small dog behavior. He's kind of got a full personality.
Yeah, I asked a lot of questions about like how are we treating BD1? Like a robot, like a being, and then we came up with kind of like a pet, right? Like a very like intelligent pet. It seems like a good analogy. And trusty pet. And there's this one scene where near the beginning where there's this animal, I forget what it was, this like giant thing, and BD. I don't know. I haven't seen that part of the game, but there was a thing where BD kind of explores it and goes up the creature's nose or something, and then gets sneezed out. I don't know if did that stay in it?
That it's like a giant dinosaur thing. Is that what
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that Cal says to him, because Cal is like, I can't lose you. I can't handle any more losses. He's like, you can't do that. You can't, he's crusting over because he doesn't want any more losses. He can't have any more losses. It's kind of a simple scene, but it has, real emotional resonance. As long as as long as you have charted kind of the through line for Cal, right, which is that there's all his losses, and he wants to recover from those losses and bring people back together and prevent any more losses from happening.
So you mentioned your book and talked a little bit about it, but have you decided on kind of like the structure? Like, is that going to be semi-autobiographical, or is it going to be more of like a handbook to directing, or how would you describe that?
It's the handbook. It's a manual. I think of it as a manual, but of course, through my perspective, right? Every chapter has a little story about an experience, a game directing experience at the beginning of the chapter. And then I go into the chapter, and then there's paragraphs and topics, but then there's a lot of sidebars with sort of like recipes for things like, how to run a rehearsal, or, how to do a table read, or ideas for things. I want it to be less kind of texty and more like a manual. Someone just asked me yesterday, can you put photos in it? And I was like, I don't know. Can you put photos from your work? I was like, I have photos, but there's so many rights involved with that. But, maybe drawings or something. I don't know visually how it's going to look. But so there's some memoir type stuff. And the first chapter, the introduction is a little bit like, how I kind of got into video games and how I got into theater and everything like that. There's a chapter there's something I'm very big on called the three things that you need to, at the minimum, you need to know the three things. The three things are place. So it's the environment. What is it? Where are we? What's going on? Time, which is what just happened. What just happened right before this? Where are we in time? Why now? And then the third thing is the action, right? What do the characters want to accomplish or need to accomplish in the same PTA, right? Is the analogy, the acronym. And I was thinking about, I had this story about when I auditioned for a drama school that I really wanted to get into. And my parents had split up and we had a lot less money. And this was a state university in New York. It was State University of New York at Purchase, which a lot of very esteemed actors have come out of. Philip Seymour Hoffman, other people came out of that. And it was just beginning. And I was like, I got to get into this. And they sent a thing of monologues. And you had to pick one of the monologues, and do it. And I picked this one from this play called The Rainmaker, a 1950s play. They made a movie out of it with Burt Lancaster about a guy who claims he can make rain. And I picked this monologue. And I had a horrible trip there. My father took me in a Volkswagen that had no heat in the New York State Thruway in a blinding snowstorm. And we got to the thing, and I was in this. It was in this old house with paper thin walls. And I did the monologue, and the guy looked at me and he went, "Did you read the play?" And I was like, "Duh! Oh my God! Fail! I failed." And I was like, "No." And he said, "Okay." He's like, "Did you come with anybody today?" And I said, "Yeah, my father." And he goes, "Okay, so do the monologue as a confession to your father," which was a brilliant adjustment. I could not do it. But if I had known, I didn't get in. I went to a different school. But if I had known these three things, even if I hadn't read the play, I would have said to him, "Okay, well, where are we? What just happened before this? And what's this character's action? What do you think this character's action in?" And I could have, if I just had known to ask those three questions in the moment, I could have saved it. But I was just like, no, I should have read the thing. I didn't read the thing, blah, blah, blah. But those three things will get you very far. And you also always have to, I mean, that's the thing. Even if I know those things, again, there's so many scenes and things change whenever we're going to do a scene in the volume, I'll be like, now remind me, where are we? Especially with gameplay. What did we just go through a moment ago to get to this scene in gameplay, right? And where are we? We're on a starship, or we're in a kind of a warehouse somewhere. We're on a planet. What's around? And then what's our action? Where are we going? What do we have to do? What do we want to accomplish here? And what effect do we want to have? Even if I have ideas about those things, I always try to clarify it again from the team. And sometimes they don't always know. I think we blah, 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 right? Or they have to call up the person who knows. Well, gameplay is still working on this thing. So it could be this, it could be that.
Can you say anything about what your sort of next project is? I mean, I know you did Young Blood, and that was, 2020 that came out or something? So are you kind of working with like machine games again at any point? Or are you sort of doing EA stuff? Are you allowed to say anything?
I'm working with machine games.
Well, that's what I was hoping you'd say, but I didn't. I didn't know how far you could take that one, but I have my sort of hunch there, so that's very cool.
I can't take it any farther, but I'm working with machine games.
Wow, that's very exciting. I'm happy for you.
It is very exciting. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know we talked a lot before, but that was years ago, so it was cool to catch up and hear about how the Jedi Survivor sausage got made. And yeah, it was a phenomenal game. I redid the Coruscant section over again. I've restarted. It's just that good. So, and you start to notice things, of course, on the second playthrough that foreshadow things that you didn't see on the first time, which is cool to see. So awesome. Well, best of luck with everything. And
all right, and to you too.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too. Take care.